Good morning, everyone. My name is Kathy Lovett. I'm the Compliance Unit Manager in the Division of Federal Fiscal Compliance and Reporting. Thank you very much for joining us today as we go over the district request for indirect cost rates for the 24-25 school year. This presentation aims to provide comprehensive information about the indirect cost rate proposal, the additional cost workbook, and the certification process. This is the first of two identical trainings. Today's our first training, and the next one will be December the 13th, and they will be identical. And then later on in January, we will set up a office hour session, and more information about that will be coming a little bit later. So a quick reminder, this training is applicable only to school districts and not to charter schools, because charter schools follow a different process for acquiring an indirect cost rate. For those of you who have attended our presentations in the past, you'll find that the training today remains consistent. There haven't been any real changes, so we're just reemphasizing the points that we've done in the past. No real changes, only updated dates. So in order to keep track, next slide, in order to keep track of who's participating in our trainings, TEA has implemented a process where we have these scan codes where we can keep track of who's participating. So please take a moment to scan this code, and it'll lead you to a form to fill out. So we need you to fill out that form. The form will be titled 11-14-23 ICRP, ACW, and certification. So this will give us an idea of how many people are participating, what LEAs are participating, and it'll help us improve our services and our outreach to LEAs. So we appreciate you taking just a minute or two to complete this. And we'll show this again at the end of the presentation. So if you didn't get a chance to scan it now, we'll give you another opportunity at the end. Okay, we'll move on. As part of all of our presentations, we have this standard disclaimer. This presentation and slide deck represent TEA's interpretation of federal laws and guidance pertaining to the issuance of indirect cost rates. However, it's important to note that this guidance does not constitute legal advice, so LEAs are strongly advised to seek legal counsel before taking any actions based on the information and guidance provided in this presentation. So that's the introduction, and now I'm going to turn it over to Ashley, who will talk about our agenda for today.
Thank you, Kathy. As Kathy mentioned, I'll be going over the agenda, but before doing so, I just wanted to introduce myself. I am Ashley Rubio. I will be one of the presenters today. Alongside me will be the project lead of the indirect cost rate, which is Saida Durenga. This presentation is in a webinar setting, so therefore all of the mics have been muted. Therefore, if you have any questions, we do encourage you to use the Q&A section. At the bottom, you should be able to see Q&A where you can then click on it, type your question in, and they will be reviewed and answered by our supporting colleagues, Trisha Murray and Kathy Levitt. We will also have time at the end for questions as well. That way, if we didn't address them at the time, we'll go ahead and address them at that point. So going into our agenda, we will be going over the role of the United States Department of Education, what we all know as USDE, the ICRP and ICRP ACW overview, our timeline, how to complete the ICRP ACW, how to submit the ICRP ACW, ICRP next steps, and reviewing and certifying the ICRP. So before we kind of jump into the beginning of our agenda, I would like to kind of point out our indirect cost rates webpage. So in this webpage, it is located in the TEA website. You'll be able to see various links there that we have provided for LEAs with up-to-date resources and tools for this new cycle. You'll be able to find accessible links like the ICRP Additional Cost Workbook Excel version. This is where you'll be able to get that Excel version and enter the data that's required. For additional resources, we have the ICRP ACW Instruction Manual, an ICRP ACW FAQ, which is extremely helpful. I do recommend you looking at those FAQs if you have any questions. In addition, we also have provided copies of this presentation of the PowerPoint in PDF format and as well as Excel. So we'll first go ahead and get started with the USD methodology overview. So this overview is for calculating indirect cost rates, which is dictated by federal laws and the U.S. Department of Education, USDE. So by designating TEA as the cognizant agency for indirect costs, USDE authorizes TEA to issue indirect cost rates to independent school districts, open enrollment charters, education service centers, and other government agencies, also known as OGAs, such as Harris County, Texas Juvenile Justice Department, and Windham School District. USDE and TEA are in delegation agreement where they approve our method and procedures of calculating indirect cost rates. The current delegation agreement that was received in 2019 is still in effect for next cycle. Therefore, there are no changes in the indirect cost rate calculation and application process for 24-25 school year that you see in this presentation. The reason why our forms and procedures are consistent is because they are approved by USDE and we cannot change our process without a new delegation agreement. So here's an overview of the USDE delegation agreement, which is the beginning of school year 2020, 2021 and beyond. We received a new delegation agreement from USDE that specifies the approved indirect cost calculation methodology. In the agreement, USDE reaffirmed and clarified current procedures in the LEA plan. No indirect cost rate extensions are allowed, and all indirect cost rate extensions beyond 2017 and 2018 were rescinded. Rates must be requested by districts every year and then calculated by TEA every year. 3 years of financial data must be used to calculate indirect cost rates. For instance, to calculate rates for 24-25 school year or fiscal year 25, financial data from 2020, 2021, 2021, 2022, and 2022, 2023 will be utilized. So to understand indirect cost rates, we first should go over the two types of rates that TEA issues. The first one is unrestricted rate, which are applied to grants not subject to the federal supplement not supplant requirement. The restricted rate are used for grant programs where the supplement not supplant requirement applies. So keep in mind that most of the grants that TEA administers are subject to supplant not supplant, and therefore the restricted rate applies to those. The supplement not supplant requirement means grant funds must be used only to enhance and support existing state and locally funded activities. The grant funds must not be used to replace state or locally funded activities. Most of the federal grants that TEA administers are subject to this requirement, and the restricted rate indirect cost rate is applied to those. For the indirect cost rate proposal overview, because of the size and the amount of and complexity of the data required by the ICRP, TEA has developed a data collection methodology that utilizes PEIMS data. However, a small amount of the required data cannot be obtained by PEIMS. Therefore, districts will be asked to provide a small amount of an additional cost data to TEA, also known as the ICRP ACW. Districts can easily obtain this additional cost data by running simple queries within their financial accounting systems. Districts will not be required to analyze or classify any costs. Because districts are required to request rates, and because TEA needs a small amount of additional cost information for the ICRP, the procedure for the districts to request indirect cost rates for school year 24-25 through the submission of, again, the ICRP ACW.
Ashley, a couple of folks are saying they're having trouble hearing. So if you might
Okay.
just speak up just a little bit.
Absolutely. Let me bring my computer closer, see if it helps. Okay, so now on to the ICRP additional cost workbook. So therefore, since rates effective begin with 2018-2019 school year, districts have been required to request indirect cost rates by each year by completing the ICRP ACW. The submission of the ICRP serves as the district's official request. So therefore, in order for you to request an or a rate, you must submit an ACW for us to know that you are requesting a rate. If a completed ACW is not submitted by the district, TEA will not calculate or issue rates for that district for the upcoming school year. Once the ACW is submitted, TEA will then merge the ACW data with the PEIMS data to produce the completed ICRP, which will then be made available to districts. The final step for districts will be to complete the ICRP review and then certify the rates. Once TEA receives the ACW, we will pre-populate the ICRP with the following data. The district submitted ICRP ACW will provide approximately 10% of the data required in a completed ICRP. TEA will obtain the remaining data from ICRP PEIMS. And then we will then populate the ICRP for each district that submits an ICRP ACW by merging the PEIMS data with the data submitted by the district in the ICRP ACW. Remember, TEA is requesting this additional data via the ACW because that data is required for the indirect cost rate calculation and cannot be obtained through the PEIMS system. The districts should maintain a copy of all financial records used to complete the ICRP ACW, just in case of any audit, and we want to ensure that we have documentation per request. Now we'll go over the indirect cost rates timeline. So this timeline consists of important dates, which is a good cue for districts of when they are due. What I like to do is, just because I like to have a physical paper on hand, is I will print this slide out and I'll have it on my desk, and just so I can make sure that I'm up to par with the dates that are coming up. So here you'll see that the ACW was made available to districts on November the 2nd. So you should be able to see that again via our webpage on the TEA website. And you will also, the due date to the ICRP is January 19th, 2024. So please make sure you have a big asterisk next to that or a red mark on it so you can remember the date for that. TEA will post the complete ICRPs by April 18th, 2024 in GFF's reports, and districts will then be required to review and certify the acceptance of the resulting indirect cost rates by May 17th. So again, that's another good indication to put like a red mark or a star to make sure you have May 17th for that certification in your head as well. Finally, TEA will post official rates by July 1st, 2024, and that is the timeline for the indirect cost rates. So I'll go ahead at this time and hand the next part over of our presentation to Saida, who will be going over how to complete the ICRP ACW.
Saida, you're muted.
There, can you hear me now? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Thank you, Ashley. And good morning, everyone. I'm pleased you could join us this morning. And as Kathy and Ashley mentioned, if you have done this training in the past, it serves as a refresher because our process haven't changed. But for those joining us for the first time, I trust you'll find the information beneficial for completing the indirect cost rate application. So in the upcoming slides, I'll be addressing the various tabs that the additional cost workbook contains, as well as outlining the information requested from districts that TEA can't currently obtain through PEIMS. So the first tab we have in the ACW is the LEA information and certification of additional costs. Please provide the following information for the ISD to confirm the accuracy of all submitted data. So the name of the LEA, this is a drop down. So you select the ISD name in the pull down field. And once an LEA name is selected, the county district number or the CDN will populate. And then the name of the LEA and the CDN number will also populate to the header of each worksheet. Name of the primary contact, this will be the person completing the workbook. So if we have any questions or we need some clarification, this would be the person that we will contact. The title of the person completing the workbook, the phone number, email, and date of completion on this first tab of the ACW. Next, we have this checklist tab, and this checklist is intended to aid LEAs in addressing and providing clarification for potential questions that might arise while completing the workbook. We strongly encourage you to utilize this tab for a review of your data entry prior to submitting the ICRP ACW. It will provide a clear overview of all the tabs and the sections within the ACW that must be completed before the workbook is submitted to TEA. So we really highly encourage you to just use this checklist. It's available, it's within the workbook. So please utilize that before you submit your ACW to TEA. The next tab is the organizational chart sample tab, which includes a sample of the organizational chart that districts are required to submit for fiscal year 2023. This sample serves as a reference for district to understand the format and content expected in their org chart submission. The organizational chart worksheet, the process for submitting the org chart is the same as last year. Districts can insert their org chart into this worksheet, and instructions on how to do so can be found within the highlighted section on this tab. Districts are not required and will not submit a separate document in GFFC reports and data collections. And one thing I'd like to note here is that the org chart must support the Chief Executive Officer information on the additional cost fiscal year 23 tab that we'll look at later on. Therefore, this year, LEAs need to submit fiscal year 2023 or school year 2022-2023 org chart in this tab. As discussed earlier, the 2018-2019 school year was the first year TA implemented the required 3 years of financial data to calculate the 1-year rates. If your district requested a raise since the new process has been implemented, you would have seen 3 additional cost worksheets, one for each fiscal year required to be included in the ICRP during your ICRP review process. If your district received indirect cost rates for 23-24 school year, the current school year, and is requesting again for next school year, 24-25 school year, you'll only have to submit 1 additional cost worksheet for fiscal year 23, because we have retained the data you already submitted for the previous 2 years, which is your 2021 and 21-22 school year. But if your district did not receive rates for 23-24 school year, then you'll have to submit a 3 years worth of additional cost data. That is your fiscal year 21, 22, and 23, or for whichever years TA does not have data for your district. If that is the case, you will need to email us so that we can provide you with a 3-year workbook, or what we call a new request workbook. Please note when you're entering data that the fiscal year noted in the heading of the worksheet matches the data that you'll enter. This is to avoid submitting a wrong year ACW and or a wrong year data. As I highlighted in the previous slide, first year is the only year districts are required to provide data spanning the 3 years. In subsequent years, the district will be required to provide data only for the years not previously submitted. And to gather the majority of the requested information, districts should run accounting system queries. The completion of the workbook should be handled by a staff familiar with the accounting system queries. It's important to note that at this stage, the district is not required to conduct any cost analysis or classify costs. It is crucial not to leave any section blank or incomplete, as doing so may lead to delays in the district receiving indirect cost rate due to insufficient information. If there are no costs to report in a particular section, please indicate a 0 as the expenditure amount. In the upcoming slides, we will explore various sections of the additional cost fiscal year 3 tab. Then I'll also provide examples of the types of queries to run to obtain the data requested in the workbook. So first, the first section in the additional cost fiscal year 23 tab is function 41, general governance and direct cost. In this section, you need to enter the expenditure for org codes 702, 703, and 720 by fund, function, and object code as requested here in the worksheet. Except for excluded cost and org 720 direct cost, expenditure within the function 41 are treated as indirect costs for the indirect cost rate calculation. And when calculating indirect cost rates, expenditure within function 41 are treated as follows. Your org 702 school board is excluded cost, the org 703 tax office is an excluded cost, and then org 720 direct cost is a direct cost. So I'll be giving you 2 examples of simple queries in this section. The first one we'll look at is line item 1, fund 100, function 41, object 6100 for 702 school board. In this instant, 2 queries are needed. The query expenditure for fund 100, function 41, object 6100, org 702, and fund 100, function 41, object 6144, org 702. Then from the resulting amounts, you do need to deduct that object 6144 total from the object 6100 total and report the amount in the corresponding line item cell. And that is because your object 6144 is excluded. And then the second example will be for line item 2, that it would be for fund 100, function 41, object 6200 for 703 tax office. For this one, only 1 query is needed. The query expenditure for fund 100, function 41, object 6200 for org 703, excuse me, 703. Then you report the amount in the corresponding line item. Next section is the TRS on behalf payments and or Medicare Part D payments. Enter the expenditure for all TRS on behalf payments and or Medicare Part D payments made during the applicable fiscal year by the appropriate fund, function, and object 6144 code as requested in the worksheet. These payments are considered excluded in the indirect cost rate calculation. An example query for this section would be, again, I'll be using line item 1, fund 100, object 6144 for function 1x. 1 query is needed. The query expenditure that you will not need to run will be for fund 100, function 1x, object 6144. And then you report the amount in the corresponding line item cell. Next up, we have food and milk costs of food service program. Enter all food and milk expenditure in a food service program made during the applicable fiscal year by appropriate fund, function, and object 6341 code as requested in the worksheet. An example query for line item 1 will be for fund 100, object 6341 for function 3x. 1 query is needed in this instance also. The query expenditure for fund 100, function 3x, object 6341, then you report the amount in the corresponding line item cell. Expenditures for food and milk in food service program are considered excluded cost. Next up, we have depreciation expense amount. Enter the local depreciation expense charged to governmental activities for buildings, improvements, and furniture, equipment, and vehicles. Reporting depreciation expense accurately is essential and is required. under or over reporting depreciation amounts will significantly distort the calculated indirect cost rate. The information needed to complete the depreciation expense amount section can be found in the notes to the financial statement section of your district's annual financial report under capital assets or capital asset activity. And the district must enter the depreciation amount for the total cost for both building improvements and furniture, equipment, and vehicles, and that amount cannot exceed the net depreciation amounts listed for the assets as reported in the notes to the financial statement section. Here's an example of the capital asset activity from a sample district and how the costs are broken down and reported. So you need to determine the increase for buildings and improvements and capital lease, if applicable and itemized. You need to determine the increase for furniture, equipment, and vehicles and ensure that the total increase are equal to the amount of depreciation charged to governmental activities. Then you review the expenses charged to governmental activities and note any charge to federal funds, and then you need to remove the federal funds and then report the rest in this section.
Saida,
Yes.
there's a question. Can we go back to food and milk? There's a question about if they have a food service management company, do they report the food service cost as zero since they pay the company directly?
That would be reported in the federal fiscal, the subrecipient section, which will be covering after this. If they're subcontracting their food program services, that would be where it will be reported.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll be covering that right after payments to fiscal agent. Okay, so payments to fiscal agent, member districts of shared service arrangements or SSAs. In this one, there is a question that you need to answer. You need to answer yes or no to the question, did the LA make payments to a fiscal agent and or member district of an SSA funded with federal grant funds from Function 93? Please note that the question is asking about payments from federal grant funds. Maybe many districts are participating in a non-federally funded SSAs. So if your answer is no, then you can proceed to the next section as no further data entry is required. But if you answer yes, then you complete the section by providing the requested details on any payments made to fiscal agents or your member districts of an SSA for federally funded SSAs. So the best query to gather that data is a query of payment history for Function 93 Object 649X. This report will provide the SSA payments by fund, itemize the payments in the worksheet based on funding source. And one thing I would like to note here is it's very important to include the CFDA number, as this number confirms that the payments that was made with federal funds. And if there is no CFDA number, then the payment was not likely made from federal funds and should not be reported in this section. These payments are considered excluded cost in the indirect cost rate calculation, except for the first $25,000 of each payment, which is counted as direct cost. You will be inputting the total amount of SSA payments, but the final ICRP will calculate as direct cost only the first $25,000 of each payments, but then the remainder of each payment will be considered excluded costs, but you will need to include the full amount of payments in this section. Next up, we have the federal subrecipient item, federal subgrants, and federal grant pass-through funds. A subrecipient item is the payment of federal grant funds by the district to another entity to carry out a portion or all of a federal grant program. A subrecipient or the payee is the entity to which you distribute funds in a subgrant. The federal subrecipient section is used if your district issued a subgrant for food and service program and or other pass-through funds. I hope this, as we covered this, that question that was in the Q&A will be addressed, Patty. And if they need more clarification, we can address it later. But yeah, so like I said earlier, this section is where you would input the amount if your district issued a sub-grant for a food service program. Funds, so funds given to other entities that are not fiscal agents or member districts of SSA is what would be included in this section. One thing to highlight, for the purpose of the ICRP ACW, we have separated the payments to fiscal agent SSAs from other federal subrecipient items to define cost. So again, here you need to answer yes or no to the question: did the school district distribute federal grant funds as a sub-grant or as federal grant pass-through funds? If your answer is no, then you can proceed to the next section, as no further data entry is required. Most districts will answer no to this question, but if the answer is yes, then you need to complete the section by providing the requested details on the subrecipient items. You need to enter all federal subgrants and or other federal grant pass-through funds by selecting the fund, the function, and object codes under the payment under which the payment was made, and then you enter the payee name, a description of the subrecipient item, the CFDA number, the begin and end dates, and then finally the amount of the payment. Here again, it is important to include the CFDA number, as this number confirms that the payment was made with federal funds. If there is no CFDA number, then the payment was not likely made from federal funds and should not be reported here. For the purpose of the ICRP, TA is only concerned with major subgrants and has adopted the accepted definition that a major subgrant is one that exceeds $25,000 in expenditure per year. For this reason, do not include subgrants or subcontracts that are less than $25,000 and do not include the first $25,000 of payments in subgrants or subcontracts that are greater than $25,000. One thing to note here, districts will not have subgrants or grant pass-through funds on educational grants. However, districts may have subgrants or grant pass-through funds on a non-educational grants awarded by another agency. We do not expect to see items entered in this section unless a district has issued a subgrant for their food service program. The federal subrecipient items are considered excluded cost in the indirect cost rate calculation, except for the first $25,000 of each payment for a major subgrant, which is greater than $25,000. And that first $25,000 of a major subgrant will be considered as direct cost in the calculation, because these funds still have direct and administrative costs associated with them. Next up, we have contingencies. These are funds that are set aside for possible future expenses, unforeseen risks such as lawsuit settlements or refunds to TEA. An example that we give in the workbook is a monetary judgment against the districts, and these are excluded costs in the indirect cost rate calculation. Here again, you need to select the fund, function, and object code from the pull-down list and enter a description and the amount of the contingency. Next up, we have the Chief Executive Officer information. Enter all expenditures for Chief Executive officers and their immediate support person, state and local salaries, and fixed costs by function and position name. These positions are they should correspond to the org chart that you will be inserting and pasting within the ICRP ACW org chart that we looked at earlier. TA will review and verify that the org charts support the position titles and details entered in this section. In this section, the district enters costs related to the superintendent and chief executive officer within the school. The costs, facilities, and administrative associated with these positions are indirect costs when paid with state and local funds. However, when calculating the restricted indirect cost, this cost must be moved from the indirect cost pool to the modified total direct cost, or what we call the base. The modified total direct cost, it consists of your direct and unallowable costs. The positions that must be reported in this section include the superintendent, the immediate employees who serve as the executive or administrative assistant to the superintendent, all staff members who act as CEOs of any component of the district, regardless of their actual titles. These can include members of your district-wide strategic planning and or executive management team or your superintendent cabinets. What a component is an organizational unit that benefits the entire district. And on a district's org chart, CEOs are generally one level below the superintendent, although in large districts, CEOs may be 2 levels below the superintendent, and they generally hold titles such as assistant superintendent, deputy superintendent, chief financial officer, and human resource executive director. And you'll also need to include the immediate employees who serve as the executive or administrative assistant to the CEO positions that we just discussed. For each position, you do need to enter the following information. You need to select the function code from which the indirect salary and fixed costs are paid from the pull-down list, the position title, the salary amount paid from state and local funds, the fixed cost amount paid from state and local funds, then the staff count for the position. And if the position is funded from multiple functions, enter multiple line items for the position, and then you enter only one on one line item under staff count for number of positions. Next, we have terminal leave. Terminal leave is a leave paid to departing employees outside of the normal routine payments for either the accumulation of vacation leave or as part of an employee contract. Here again, you do need to answer a yes or no to the question, did the LEA make payments to one or more departing employees for terminal leave? And if your answer is no, the section is complete and no further data entry is required. But if the answer is yes, then you need to complete the section by providing the requested expenditure for each employee by providing the fund, function, and object from which the payment was made, and the location, and then the job title and name of the employee. Also, you need to select from the pull down the direct or indirect nature of the employee and the amount paid. Most districts do not have terminal leave because most do not provide formal vacation leave. This is the last section on the additional cost fiscal year 23 tab. And before we cover how to submit your completed additional cost workbook, Ashley is going to quickly go over some common mistakes we've come across during our review process. Ashley?
Thank you, Saida. Okay, so for these next few slides, I'm going to go ahead and discuss some areas of opportunity to focus on when completing the following sections. So you will see that I'll be reiterating some of the sections that Saida just went over, just so you can kind of see what we've noticed in our review and to help LEAs refrain from having any errors or missing data. So I kind of do also want to go back to the checklist that was recommended to use in the beginning of this presentation. If you've been to if you've attended our trainings before regarding the ICRP ACW, I do like to use an analogy for this section when referring to the checklist. So I'm going to go ahead and do it again. So essentially, the way that I look at this checklist for the ICRP ACW that is attached to the Excel version is kind of like a grocery list. So when you're going to your favorite grocery store, before you head there, I assume most or some of you will write down a list of the ingredients that you need, depending on what you're going to buy at the grocery store. So to ensure that you get every item on that list, you want to make sure that at the grocery store that you obtain everything that you need by checking off that list or doing a scratch line, whatever it is that you do. So in the same concept, I like to use this ICRP ACW checklist as a grocery list. So we kind of want you to cook up a good ICRP ACW recipe, but in order for you to do that, we do want to make sure you're using that list by checking off and ensuring that you completed the ICRP ACW correctly. So let's just go ahead and jump into some common mistakes that we've kind of seen when reviewing, and we'll start with the depreciation expenses. So our team has identified under depreciation expenses that amounts were either left blank or the wrong amount was reported. So just again, to reiterate, it's very important to report an expense to prevent any resubmission of the information, which will delay processing times. And if the amount reported is under or over reporting, the depreciation amount can distort the indirect cost rates. So just a reminder, complete this section by entering the total depreciation charged to governmental funds, which include expense amounts charged to governmental activities for both buildings, improvements, furniture, equipment, and vehicles. So we're going to go ahead and move on to payments to fiscal agent member districts of shared services, SSAs. So another area of opportunity is to ensure that this data is complete. If you're completing this section, it's important to select an answer from that pull down list, which will either be yes or no. Again, if you select the answer to be no, then you can move on from the section and move forward to the next one. But if you select yes, please make sure to enter all payments made to fiscal agents and or districts of an SSA for federally funded SSAs. So you're going to enter the name of the SSA, include that CFDA number. That's a very important thing to include because that's going to confirm that that payment was made with federal funds. Also include the begin and end date and the amount. Here are some more areas of opportunities to focus on. For federal subrecipient items, we've identified incomplete data and no selection from the pull down list. So again, from that pull down list that's located on that right-hand side of the data sheet, you're going to go ahead and select yes or no to the question. If no, the section is complete. But if yes, you're going to complete this section by providing the requested details of the subrecipient items, which include the fund, function, and object codes under which the payment was made. Enter the payee name, a description of the subrecipient item, again, that CFDA number, begin and end date, and the amount. Here with the contingencies, this section, you want to focus to ensure that a selection is made from all pull down lists. So sometimes we'll see a description, but then there's missing fund, function, and object codes. So make sure that entire section is completed in its entirety. So again, select the fund, function, and object code from that pull down list and enter all expenditures for all contingencies that the district had within its total governmental expenditures. I would say that this is the biggest area where we see missing data, you know, some sections were completed, but not the entirety of it. So I would keep focus on this one as well. It's at the bottom of the ACW when you're about to complete it. I know at the top, you're kind of like, oh, I put in all this data. And then when you get to the end, you kind of get a little tired. You can put it aside and come back to it. But again, just remember you're completing all the sections. So we'll just end off with this one. This is last but not least, of course, the Chief Executive Officer Information or CEO section. So common areas of opportunity is to include the selection from the pull down list, the number of positions, and make sure that the positions are listed, the position title, the object codes, and the expenditure amount for that position as well. So select the function code from the pull down list, which indicates the indirect salary fixed costs, like what were they paid from, the position title, the salary amount paid from state and local funds, the fixed cost amount paid from state and local funds, and the staff count for the position. So some examples, because I know we get a lot of questions regarding which positions should be and should not be listed. So I'm going to give you actually some examples of positions that should not be listed under this section. For example, campus principals, special education programs, federal programs, transportation programs, food service programs, art programs, board of trustees. So this is not the only positions that should not be listed. If you want more to look into, we do offer that in our FAQ document, which is on pages 10 and 11. Again, you can locate that on our ICRP webpage. That document has I would say a good plethora of information and answers for you to refer to. So again, it's important to complete the entirety of the ICRP ACW with true and accurate data. So therefore, we recommend using this checklist. And like I'll reiterate, we love to see whenever you cook up a great ICRP ACW recipe, we see all the hard work that you put into it, and we appreciate your time and your effort that you do when it comes to inputting all this data. So thank you all again for seeing these common mistakes. That way we can kind of nip them and make sure that we get them this time around. So I'm going to go ahead and hand the next section of the remaining presentation over to Saida, and she'll go over how to submit the ICRP ACW.
Thank you, Ashley. So once we have a completed ACW, I'll be going over the steps how to submit it. First, you need to do login to TA, login or till. Then you select GFFC reports and data collections. Then you select to upload response documents. Select ICRP additional course workbook from the response template title pull-down menu. And one thing I would like to mention here, we expect to see the workbooks that are submitted need to be in an Excel format. And then the next step is you select your response document from the response doc type pull-down menu. You select the school year for which you are requesting indirect push rates from the school year pull-down menu. And if you are submitting in the fall of 2023 or the spring of 2024, you select the school year 2024-2025 school year, and then you select upload document. And we will be quickly looking at what the next steps are once we receive district's ACW. So again, to receive indirect push rates for 24-25, districts must submit the ICRP ACW by January 19, 2024. Ashley did mention earlier that we only calculate rates for district that submit the ACW. TA's Federal Fiscal Compliance and Reporting Division will calculate the final, collect final 22-23 PIMS data in the spring of 2024 to complete the data needed to create an ICRP. Then we'll merge the district submitted ICRP ACW data with PIMS data to create and pre-populate the complete ICRP. Then we'll post the complete ICRPs in GFFC reports and data collection for districts to review. Districts will be required to review and certify acceptance of the resulting indirect push rate. Districts typically have approximately about a month to review their indirect push rate proposal and submit the ICRP certification, which we'll look at in a while. And then the new rates will become effective July 1st of 2024. So once the ICRP are available in GFFC, now we'll be looking at how do we review the ICRP financial worksheets. When first generated, the ICRP is an Excel form, which will be converted into a PDF and posted in GFFC reports and data collection. That's why I was saying earlier that we expect the format of the ACW that you submit in GFFC to be in an Excel format. And then when we post it onto GFFC, it would be in a PDF format. But if your district would like the Excel version, you can please email FFCR compliance@pea.texas.gov, and we'll be more than happy to provide that. So when reviewing the ICRP, you'll notice that the pages are labeled on the bottom of each pages. So your U1 all years or pages 2 to 3 are the summary of the the unrestricted rates data average for all 3 years. R1 all years, which are found on pages 5 to 6, are summary of the restricted rates data average for all 3 years. Next, we have the restricted rate adjustment O. This page will show the average for all 3 years of indirect cost rate adjustment. These are the costs that are moved from the indirect cost pool to the modified total direct cost, or the MTDC, or the base. And I think I mentioned this earlier, the MTDC consists of your direct and unallowable cost. So on the unrestricted rates tab, the ISD expenditures are classified as either excluded, unallowable direct, or indirect costs based on the fund function and object. Costs classified as indirect costs on the U1 tab, used for the unrestricted rate calculation, are adjusted to determine the restricted rate. The costs that are being reclassified from indirect to the base include general management costs that are associated with the chief executive officer, their immediate officers, and component officers, and related costs. Adjustment to the unrestricted rate calculation are made, and they result in a lower rate to claim indirect cost reimbursement on restricted rate programs. And Section 4 of the restricted rate adjustment all page all provides the average amount that is moved from the indirect cost pool to the modified total direct cost on the restricted rate calculation tab. And next, we have the pages 7 to 18. It's going to contain the supporting data for each of the 3 fiscal year and show the average data elements which were used to produce the resulting rates, which is the additional cost that was submitted by the district in the TSDS PIMS financial data TA will pull. So the year 1, which are your pages 7 to 10, fiscal year 2021 will be pages 7 to 10. Year 2, which is your fiscal year 2022, data will be found on pages 11 to 14. And year 3, or fiscal year 2023, will be found on pages 15 to 18. Once your district is done reviewing the ICRP, the final step in the process is submitting the ICRP certification. One thing I'd like to note here is that the ICRP certification is different from the ACW certification. I know they look similar, but the ACW certification will certify that all submitted data is true and accurate and has the contact information of the person completing the workbook. Whereas the ICRP certification that you see here is the district certification of the information contained within the proposal. And to accept and finalize your district rates, this certification of indirect cost, which is the first page of the ICRP, must be completed, signed, and submitted back to TEA. The certification must be signed by the school district superintendent, chief executive officer, or a chief financial officer. And the certification must be for the correct school year, which is your 2024-2025 for the upcoming cycle. And the submission of this ICRP certification is the district's last step to be issued indirect cost rate for 24-25. And to complete the certification, you do need to print that first page and then enter the required information, have the superintendent, CEO, or CFO sign and date the printed page, then scan the signed and dated page and upload the scanned certification into GFFC reports as ICRP certification. And you need to submit the ICRP certification in GFFC reports and data collection by May 17. That is the due date. And in order to do that, you do need to log into TL, select the GFFC reports and data collection, select upload response documents, select ICRP certification from the response template title, pull down menu, select response document from the response doc type, pull down menu, then you select the school year 24-25 from the school year pull down menu, and then select upload. One final note regarding uploading documents to GFFC is please ensure that you index your documents with the correct document title and then the school year. This practice ensures that when reports are generated, we can accurately capture your district submission. So please make sure that you're indexing the title and the school year correctly. TA will subsequently post the approved certified indirect cost rates on the indirect cost rate webpage. And then additionally, individual districts notification letters will be uploaded into GFFC reports and data collection. As outlined in the provided timeline, I'll do a brief reminder of our timeline again. The ACW was made available on November 2nd. It's available through the indirect cost rate website and also available on GFFC reports and data collections for completion. And the due date for that is January 19th, 2024. Then we will post the completed ICRPs by April 18, 2024 in GFFC, and then districts will be required to review and certify their rates by May 17, 2024. And then TA will post official rates by July 1st of 2024. This wraps up our presentation on how to request rates for 2024-2025 school year, and we've covered the entire process from start to finish. And if you have questions or require assistance in completing the workbook, please feel free to reach us out at compliance@tea.texas.gov, and we will address any remaining questions